here we go. We got Grumpy Eye and we got Structural Salvage. Take it away, Grumpy.
Oh my god, this is awesome. Star Citizen 3.22 is Wave 1 and it's currently in the PTU for people that have spent $25,000 on this game or $10 for subscription. And Structural Salvage is already there, and you probably saw it on other people's YouTube channels and like on streams and all of that. And most
I got that queued up, Adam. I got that queued up.
I have my own opinions. I have an issue with it, but I also have solutions. So let's talk about them. Hello.
So before he gets going too far into this, what I have watched from people do Salvage, it's so basic. Like, it's so basic. Now, I understand Torsten and people said that they got this out early so that we could have it in our hands before Christmas break, but oh my God. Like, it's so, I don't know. It's by far one of the most lacking things I think that's come out so far.
Hello, my name is Grumpy. Grumpy Eye. Grumpy Eye. Grumpy Eye.
Since the PTU dropped, everyone and their mothers have been testing out the new salvage mechanics, and there's a lot of different opinions. As far as I can tell, the general consensus is that since it's not that complex and there are no gameplay mechanics tied to it, it is simply not fun to do because it's simply
doesn't
not
look fun.
engaging enough for the player. And I agree with the majority of the players.
Like, if I'm not mistaken, fly up, push button, reposition, push button, push button. It sucks it all in. Like, it just, I don't know. It just seems kind of dumb.
Base. This is just underwhelming. I did not expect much, but somehow I'm still disappointed. Especially if you consider how many years it took them to make this, and how many times during the
I had to, okay, so full disclosure, I did watch some of this and I did do some research on it. If I'm not mistaken, 2018 is when they started working on Salvage. Just let that sink in. Just let that sink in. 2018 is when they announced they were going to start working on Salvage. So, yeah.
years did they tell us that the Reclaimer Claw is supposed to do something completely different, and now it's just basically a beam. I mean, it's not even a claw, it's a straw.
It's a straw. And that's kind of the other thing that, I mean, it doesn't upset me because I'm not an owner of one, but a large majority of the ship sales, I would assume, is because of the claw and what the claw was supposed to do.
On top of that, you will earn ludicrous amounts of money for not doing anything for 20 seconds. Matter of fact is, CNG has claimed the structural salvage
almost 6 years, yeah, Jim.
mechanics will be more profitable than hull scraping, and that we could see hull munching as the cake.
Look,
and
the claw doing the claw
as the
thing,
icing on the top.
but it doesn't do the claw
I didn't want
thing.
to release a video immediately because I didn't want to just shit on it. Instead, I wanted to offer a solution, and I actually have a couple of them. One for this patch and the other for the future of Salvage. And just today, Torsten and other CAG devs have posted on Spectrum that this is just the first iteration that they wanted to give us before the holidays, and that they're waiting on Maelstrom to come online so they will give us the full mechanic. They also said that they will...
They're waiting for Maelstrom to come online. You know, that could be next year. It could be 2 years from now. We don't know. So this tier -1 or tier 0, however you view it, could still be a long ways away. It could still be a long ways away.
Nerf the payouts, which was apparent even in Evo Kadi, but I'm very concerned by this. The amount of money you earn...
Apparently they did rework
crazy,
this.
and we all knew that CAG would never allow this to happen. But instead of nerfing the prices of those construction materials that you get from structural salvage, they should nerf the yield you get from each ship, at least for now. Alright, just hear me out. There is a reason why I'm saying this. It is simple math. Construction materials are currently priced at around 12.5
They did,
Alpha UEC.
if I'm not mistaken, they did rework how much goes in the hopper or the buffer or whatever you want to call it. And but yeah, and I think they did bring down the yield, but I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% on that.
And if you fill up a reclaimer with 420 SCUs of construction materials, you will get more than 5 million alpha UEC. Matter of fact, if you only salvage one big ship and you only fill up the internal storage of the ship and immediately jump back to sell the goods, you will get around 4.5 million alpha UEC. And yeah, we have internal storage in our dispensers now, which is a great solution for the problem that we had with the vulture and the reclaimer. So good job, CAG. Look at it. Internal storage, 360 SCUs, dude.
Both of these?
Yep.
No, just one. I mean, it's for the whole thing.
That's actually really
but
cool.
I believe they dropped it down to like 240 or 250.
Is simply too much for the amount of time that you have spent salvaging. On top of that, all it takes you to earn that much money is to click on a salvageable ship and wait for 10 to 20 seconds. It's just bonkers. But on the other hand, if you manage to fill your voucher up with construction materials, you will get a drastically lower amount of money. If you manage to stick 24 SUs into the voucher, you will only get around 300,000 alpha UAC.
Man, that's still a lot of money.
I'm saying that they shouldn't nerf the prices of the construction materials. The voucher is already in a bad spot compared to the money earning potential of a prospector, and nerfing the prices of the goods will affect the vulture much more than the reclaimer. And I have a friend that I tested this out.
To answer your question, Mason, I think they nerf stuff to try to keep it balanced with what little game they have released. I say that both joking around and but also seriously when I say it's you know, what little game. But here's the thing, like, eventually you're not going to be able to go out and do these hits like Blackjack Bill has been doing. Like the other day, he made like 48 million on doing hits. You know, I don't think that's going to continue to be a thing. I don't think going to these big events and getting, you know, 500,000 payout is going to keep a thing, it's not going to be a thing anymore. So eventually when this game gets closer and closer to release, it's going to get harder and harder and harder to make money. The professions are going to get harder and harder and harder to make money in. And with the skill trees coming online within the next year to 2 years, as they discussed, you're going to get progressively pushed into a niche within Star Citizen. So if you want to be a fighter pilot, well, you're more than likely going to be a fighter pilot all the time. And based on the skills, you're probably not going to be so good at mining, and you're probably not going to be very good at FPS. But if you want to be a mining guy, you're probably going to be really good at that, but not so good at the FPS and the ship combat, and et cetera, et cetera. So eventually, this is all going to change. When? We don't know. Is it going to change? Yep. Is there going to be changes to the changes? Definitely. Is there going to be buffs? Is there going to be nerfs? Also, definitely.
Out with, and he said that Reclaimer is a capital size ship and that it should earn a lot of money, and I would have to agree. But the time and the effort that is put into
and I hate to keep pausing Grumpy, but that's the other thing too. If it's not clear to you, this game is not going to be all that solo friendly. It is going to be multi-crew, multiplayer friendly. If you don't have a crew for your big ship, it's going to be hard to play. With the big ship anyways. If you don't have a whole lot of friends within the game, what's up, Pagan? If you don't have a lot of friends online, it's going to get harder and harder to play. It's very obviously going in that direction. So just be prepared. It's it's going to be harder and harder for a solo player to make a lot of money and make a lot of money quick. And as I said before, as this gets closer and closer to release, making money is going to get harder. And we can't have crafting without an economy, but we can't have an economy without some of these other features being fleshed out. And I think they're kind of going about this backwards, but once again, that's me. That is just totally me. I don't do this stuff for a living, but I feel like it's being done backwards.
Actual salvage versus the income you get from it simply doesn't make sense right now. So for now, the only thing that makes sense is to lower the yield on the larger ships, so the reclaimer owners could earn 1 million per ship instead of 4 million that we earn right now, and they would need to do a couple of missions so they could fill their ships up. The other thing that they could do is to make it so only the salvage yards buy the construction materials, and since those are PvP hotspots already, it would just make the whole loop much more interesting, more engaging, and in the end, if there is more risk involved, then the reward is appropriate. I posted this on Spectrum, but I didn't get a response. The only response that
here's my thinking. I look, I like his idea about having to sell it to salvage yards because that's who would be buying it and then using it. Maybe at the TDDs at a lower price. But here's the thing. Most industrialists will not do salvage if they have to go to a PvP area or it's an area without an armistice. They're not going to do it. They're just not going to. We all know this. They're not going to go anywhere near a place that has no armistice to sell this stuff. And eventually, Jim, you're supposed to remove the cargo first. So you roll up on a ship. You're going to start salvaging. You're supposed to remove the ship components and the ship cargo first. Then you're supposed to scrape it. Then you're supposed to hull munch it. And that's supposed to maximize your money-making ability. The problem is that right now, the way they've set it up, at least from what I've watched, it's pretty much just do hull munching because there's no real benefit to doing the scraping too.
They got was from other people asking me, didn't
I
I
agree,
stop
Jim.
playing Star Citizen and telling me to go away. But for the CAG devs that are watching, please do not kill the vulture. But let's talk about the future of salvage and how I would do it and how it could potentially look like. I was thinking about this for a couple of days, and even though it is not my job to do this, and I'm sure the CAG could find a fun little...
Yeah, like those derelict settlements that are coming online, those are where you should be selling your drugs at. I 1,000% agree. Not at the salvage yard. Salvage yard, I think, should still be a non-armistice area, and that's where the RMC and the construction material should be going to. But I don't think that's going to happen for a long time.
Mini game for us to play while we're hull munching, I still want to give them my solution because this could potentially inspire the developers. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure that we will wait on Maelstrom for quite some time in making something
that's what
like this.
That's what I said.
Isn't that hard to do? And my idea would be to make it into something that hasn't been done before in gaming, as far as I know at least. Being a musician, a sound engineer, and a music producer, the first thing that comes to mind is to use sound to fracture ships. And now you're probably typing, well, Grumpy, there is no sound in space. But this is a sci-fi game, and just like the wind being able to bring down a bridge, there are other ways to make objects vibrate. As an example, during one of the protests in Serbia, we had a massive amount of people walking over a bridge. That bridge has been there for half a century, and it could hold weights much higher than all the people combined that were on it at that point. But our footsteps...
I saw your comment, Adam, but the biggest problem is we still don't have an economy yet, and the economy that Star Citizen wants is a dynamic, living, ever-moving economy. And you know, they talked about it 3 years ago, Tony Z and his Quanta, and we haven't heard about that really since then. And then I think it was 4 months ago, they hired 4 people to start working as the economy team. And then we were supposed to get an announcement about economy a month after SitCon. And then they put a fork in that and said, nope, you guys are going to have to wait a while longer before we talk about economy. So who knows what's going on.
Made the bridge vibrate that much that it started swinging, and it was very noticeable, and we all had to stop and go over in smaller groups so it wouldn't collapse. By the way, fun, well, not so fun for me, but I guess a fun and completely unrelated fact is that the clips that you just saw were from my music video that I made for my song that was called Ljudili smo mostove in Serbian, or in English it would be like we made the bridges swing. That was like dedicated to those protests and all of that. And yeah, it got hacked. I got hacked, my account got hacked, and it got taken down just as it was like closing.
Right, but they don't really fluctuate, which kind of sucks. There's no actual supply and demand. So, and I think what they're possibly going to do is when they finally get some sort of server meshing is when they're going to actually start doing a supply and demand and ever changing prices. So, you know, that way, for example, Quantanium isn't 27K an SCU. It could be at one place, you know, 40K, but at another place only 5K. So it's going to go up and down, up and down, up and down.
To like 100,000 views.
And yeah,
yeah,
there's a lot of
fun. Anyway.
You can use vibrations, sound frequencies. Well, sound frequencies are vibrations, but vibrations, once you find a certain, I think it's a resonance, you can bring down just about anything.
You all probably seen articles on how a black hole sounds, or how certain objects in space are emitting sound throughout space. Matter of fact is, the frequencies that the scientists got from those objects are very different to what we see or hear. They are either emitting waves that are outside of the audible spectrum of ours, or they're emitting energy outside of the spectrum of light that is visible to the naked eye. So basically what they do is they convert that recording into sound, or they get it into the spectrum of visible light so we could all enjoy and admire how beautiful the nature is.
Yeah.
So
for sure,
just
Pagan.
using sound as a starting point because we can all understand it. Is that good enough for you guys that like, oh, there's no sound in space, yet you're completely okay with your ships moving at like...
If I'm not mistaken, the reason why humans don't hear sound in space or vibrations in space is because there's no medium for the vibration to move through for us to pick it up because of the way our ears are built and the way our skin is built on how we feel vibrations. But other things throughout the universe can feel those vibrations. But, you know, what do I know? I'm not a scientist.
Like limited speeds in a space game, like, but there is no sound in space. Jesus. Now that I said this, we can talk about my ideas on how this all should work. You've probably seen opera singers exploding glasses with their voices, or you may have seen people on YouTube trying to do the same thing and not expecting it to happen. Well, the principle is the
Freak
same
out much.
because in theory, every object will fracture or shatter into pieces if you manage to hit its resonant frequency with a high enough amplitude. And you could probably see where this is going, and I will try to make the next section as short as possible. This is a spectrum analyzer that I often use in my music production to monitor the whole frequency spectrum of the songs that I'm making. And if you put music through it, it mostly looks like this.
Hello, my name is Grumpy. Grumpy,
And there are a lot of things that are
The fact that he thought this all the way through is great.
If we want to do that, we will need to focus on the resonant frequency of said glass, and that is mostly done by focusing on a single tone. And what you're seeing right now is a single tone from a tone generator that is being fed into the same analyzer. This right here is the fundamental frequency, and these right here are the harmonic overtones of the same frequency. But we will talk about them in a bit. And yes, this is still a Star Citizen video. If you didn't fall asleep, then great, because we're getting to the meaty part. Since
meaty.
I'm not a great UI or UX designer, I did this part the best I could. The gameplay mechanic that I'm proposing is to make the player match the resonant frequency of the salvageable ship, which will mean that we will need to have at least 2 frequencies shown on the screen. So for the explanation purposes, the resonant frequency of the salvageable ship that the player needs to match is going to be red colored, and the frequency that the player is emitting from his ship is shown in green. And the player will need to slowly turn the frequency of the emitter up to match the resonant frequency of the salvageable ship. And once the frequency your ship is emitting matches the resonant frequency, you should press the fire button to fire out a shockwave that will fracture the ship. And now you might be saying, well, yeah, that's cool. But it's too simple. Like, there's no complexity to it. There is no risk.
I don't know. It's pretty cool.
If the player does not match the resonant frequency and he still sends out a shockwave, it would make the ship in front of you explode, which would in the end damage your ship. Just like what happens in mining if you overcharge the rock that you're trying to fracture. And now you can see that it's easy enough, but you will still need to have some skill because there is some risk involved. But it is still not complex enough. So now we can introduce the saturation potentiometer. And in simple terms, saturation is what will produce the
saturation.
So
saturation.
Essence, after matching the fundamental resonant frequency of the salvageable ship, we would need to match the harmonic overtones of the resonant frequency. Unfortunately, the program that I'm using for video editing does not let me open 2 plugins at the same time, so I can't really record this the way I want to. But you can see on the screen how harmonics work and how saturation knob works.
It wouldn't be a beam. It's just the waves coming out from the 2, like, in between.
It doesn't need to end there. Since we have different sized ships in this game, we could add more than a single resonant frequency to bigger ships. So we could say that the small ships only have a single resonant frequency and that they...
I think the claw should, like, grab and rip apart, but that's just me.
They are the easiest ones to fracture, but bigger ships like the Constellation series, the MSR, or the Corsair would have 2 resonant frequencies.
And what's wrong with a beam? I mean, if you're shooting out a sound wave, okay, sure, it could be a beam, and then when you hit the fracture button and it sends out a big pulse, I mean, everything in this game is done with beams. It's not really a bad thing.
Frequencies that we would need to match.
That looks cool, though. That looks really cool.
Subcapital and capital ships would have 3 resonant.
Well, oh, too many beams? I mean, as long as you don't cross the beams, you know, the verse won't explode or not explode. The verse won't implode on itself and destroy everything.
Frequencies, and only the reclaimer could fracture them because only that ship has 3 frequency generators while the vulture only has 2. But this whole mechanic will still make it possible for a pack of vultures to fracture the biggest ships. But with capital ships, you will need to fracture them a couple of times so you can munch the whole thing. Or we could just go down the space engineers route where the salvage ships have big old grinders that would make big ass holes in the ships and munch them in that way. Or they could give the reclaimer.
I kind of like the space engineers thing, but that's me.
The claw.
I've never even played Space Engineers.
So it could grab stuff and toss it in the back into the grinder pit, so the grinder pit would do its thing. Whatever it is, what we have right now needs to change because it's not engaging in any way. And even if it gets nerfed to the ground, it is still low effort game design. And that is not why we backed this game. But that is it for today, guys. Thank you for watching, and sorry about the lectures on like audio.
So before he goes, I don't know how much more he's got on here. He might have a wrap up at the end or some bonus footage or something like that. But one thing I heard when I saw this, I watched only like 4 minutes of it. I saw in his comment section, everybody's like, but it's just mining, but it's just mining. It's just like mining, but different UI. How do I put this? So what? Almost all the video games that I've ever played, a lot of the stuff that you do is exactly the same from title to title, or from company to company, or from borrowed from another game or another company. Let's take lockpicking, for example. If you've played any of the Bethesda games, Fallout, Oblivion, Skyrim, even Starfield, all the lockpicking is the exact same. It's the exact same. It is 100% exact same. You know, let's talk about Batman, for example, and all the Arkham games. They're all the same, but it's what he's talking about. There's a frequency in the Batman game, and you pull out your little hacking thing, and you rotate these thingies, right? You rotate these thingies to match the frequency, and voila, boom, you're hacked. There's a couple of other games that borrow that. It's not terrible. What makes it interesting is not just the little mini game, but what you do afterwards, chasing the profits for your recycled material, being chased by pirates, having to find a good place to like, okay, you're going to go to the illegal area or the more dangerous area so you can get a bigger price. You might have to avoid players. There might be bad spots to land because people or NPCs could be there. I don't know. Like, it's not just the mini game. There's so much more to the Star Citizen than just the mini game. And I think that's forgotten.
Stuff in sound design and frequencies and all of that, but I hope that I made you understand how everything could work potentially.
I like his idea.
Like that.
I like his idea. I think it's a good idea.
Already in the game, but it's not.
See, and he just said it here. We already have something like that with the mining gadgets in the game, so it wouldn't be that much more difficult to incorporate that from the mining gadgets to the Reclaimer and the Vulture. So I like it. I think it's a good idea. I don't think it should look like beams. I think it should, like Adam said, I think it should look more like sound waves going through space and hitting the thing, but that's me.
Really the same thing. But anyway, thank you for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and thank you to all my patrons that are supporting me. If you want to support me, there's a join button down there. There's a Patreon link in the description of the video, and all of that good stuff. You know how it works. It's YouTube. It's just how it is. But,
I need this.
Thank you for watching, and don't forget to bring a towel when you're traveling through space. And mwah.
Oh, that one's good too. I need that one.
Thank you for watching. I mean, if you got to this point, Jesus Christ, like, what are you doing with your life? That whole like explanation bit was just like too much for like most of you, I'm pretty sure. But yeah,
bye, Grumpy. Great video. I think it. I think it's a good idea.